Who do you want to be when you're 80 or 90 years old? What legacy via lives touched, photos, videos, journals, manuscripts, plaques, parks, parks named after you. What do you want your legacy to be when you're 80 or 90 years old? If you get to live to that age, what can you be doing now to affect that time in your life? For a lot of us, it feels like, Adam, I don't even know what this week is going to be like. I don't even know what this month is going to be like. You're looking at your paycheck, you're looking at your time, you're looking at equipment, you're managing all kinds of things, and you're just like, Adam, how can I do that? So today I wanted to bring on my friend, Lara Casey. She is absolutely incredible. I've had a few of you reach out to me and say, like, hey, you have to have her on. And so I researched her, wanted to make sure she was really cool. And she is. I love that she bridges the gap between intentionality with task management. Oftentimes, intentionality feels really organic and like there's no action steps. And then task management oftentimes feels like it's just a task list and it doesn't seem big picture. It doesn't feel like it's going to give you hope. It's just like, oh, I have to do these tasks. And, like how do checkboxes make you feel? And even for me, checking one off does not make me feel like, wow. So I love Lara Casey's resources for that. She's the founder of Cultivate What Matters. And she also created the PowerSheets, which are incredible. So some of you are already using them. I know that. And so I just wanted to have her on, pick her brain a little bit, ironically, just hear her story and talk about what she's doing for 2019 and what are her goals in the future for when she's 80 or 90. So without any further ado, here's Lara Casey. Lara, now that I've learned how to properly pronounce your name, I feel like I've just leveled up. So thanks for being on.
Oh, it's a joy. Thanks for having me, Adam. I'm excited.
So I only know, I've had a few people tell me who you are. I've seen your sheets and tools and the different things kind of around our community, but both in Rising Tide. Some of my mentees have the PowerSheets, I believe. And we need a background on you and how long has Cultivate What Matters been around? Give me the rundown first to start off with.
That's a great question. Cultivate was born about 7 years ago. It all started a long time ago, really, but I started Southern Weddings magazine about 12 years ago.
What? That's crazy.
Yes, crazy. And so through that, the very short version of the story is that through creating Southern Weddings from the ground up with really no formal experience. I have a degree in music theater. I don't have a degree in journalism or publishing or anything, but I did have a whole lot of passion for telling unique love stories. And so again, I'm summarizing this into such a short story because it is very long, but I did start Southern Weddings from the ground up. And a lot of people then started asking me for business advice, which is super funny because I felt like I made more mistakes than anything. But they asked me, how do you make the things happen? And I just had a lot of people email me, call me up and ask me for advice. And so I started to blog, which back then was not a common thing. If you were to say blog to someone, they would have thought you mean Blob, the movie from the 60s?
It's as weird as when somebody, it's the same connotation if somebody tells you they're starting a YouTube channel now. At first, you're kind of unless you're in the know, you're kind of oh, you just want to pour your feelings out for everybody and your knowledge for everybody. But it's no, it's the same as starting a blog back in the day. And it's no, this will pay off if you have consistency and keep going. Anyway, I just wanted to, I love that.
I think you're absolutely right. I feel like that's such a perfect parallel to that because that's what it felt like. I remember having to explain to people what a blog was back then. But the reason is because I just needed some channel, some outlet to be able to share in a wider sense all these things that multiple people were asking me because it was starting to become a little overwhelming. So long story short, I ended up starting a small workshop where I traveled the country and taught these principles on how I took an idea and then step by step, and it's not rocket science, just step by step, brought it to life.
That's incredible.
And and then I came to a point, scoot down the timeline here about 5 years. Southern Weddings is now 5 years into existence, our 5-year anniversary, 5th-year anniversary issue had just come out. We just started a partnership with Southern Living, like things were trucking along. And I was very overwhelmed. I had a new baby. I had a marriage that was really important for me to grow. We had been through a lot of challenges early on in our marriage. And the sole focus of my heart at that time was, Lord, just help me to focus on my marriage. And I had all these things that I wanted to grow. And I felt so overwhelmed by it all. Because I would get frustrated. I would come to the end of a year and I would look back and I would be so frustrated thinking, man, there are all these things that I want to grow well in life. And I feel like I'm not really growing a whole lot of anything. I'm putting a lot of effort out and I feel spread thin, which I think a lot of people can identify. You feel like you're doing a lot of things, but you're not really doing a whole lot of things well. And so I stopped, and one day I sat down at my desk and I just took out a blank old scrap piece of paper, nothing fancy, and probably a number 2 pencil. And I wrote out all of the things or areas of my life that were at the time really important to me. So number 1, my faith. Number 2, my marriage. And then I just had a new baby. So motherhood and trying to figure that whole thing out. Everything from my marriage all the way down to things like my Facebook page, like stuff that was completely neglected at the time that I wanted to use for good. I didn't want it to just kind of pass me by. And that's what I called it a tending list, because that's really what I was doing with it. I was tending. I wanted to tend to these things just like you tend to a plant, little by little over time, because I thought, okay, well, the way I'm doing things right now is not working. If I were to tend to these things little by little over time, I bet they would grow. And that is what became the first tending list. And I created a series of worksheets from that, really originally for myself, because I just felt like there were so many things I wanted to grow. How in the world is someone supposed to keep all that together? And that became the PowerSheets goal planner. So just to bring you back to speed. So we went from Southern weddings, people asking me for business advice, and then me even personally feeling like I have so much to manage. So I created the PowerSheets for myself to help me to focus on what mattered most in every season. And now here we are, I think almost 8.5 years into PowerSheets, if I have the timing correct. I never remember. But so grateful for this journey.
That's incredible. I love that. Well, if it was going poorly, that's when somebody says, well, it's been a long 137 days, you're like, oh, things might not be going well. Whereas now if you kind of forget, or you're kind of like, you know what, the timing doesn't matter how long this has been happening. What matters is going forward. And that makes sense too with kind of goals and intentionality anyway. A lot of people don't understand, even folks who listen to this and maybe they're about to become a full-time entrepreneur, like you are already running Southern Weddings. And so people don't understand that you're not just the CEO, like especially between the 5 years of transition for you of doing that, and the list of things that you're responsible for gets bigger and bigger all the time. And like you're just managing the like urgent versus important the whole time. I'm imagining it. So like, how do you, so now knowing what we know and how you've started these amazing resources, like where does somebody start in that? Like how did you? I know probably because of both fellow Christians. The order I was always taught was like Christian husband, father, pastor. So it's it's like your faith, your spouse, your children, and then your profession. And for people like us, that might be like a very good starting place. But what about the numbers 5 through 10, right? So number 5 might be what you want to do. Number 6 might be, hey, I really want to learn how to fly a helicopter. I really want to take this language class. Like, how are you taking that next step, and how do other people take that next step? Where do they go?
That's such a great question. I love the way that you laid that out too. To me, I always, and I did this even back when I was sitting at my desk so frustrated, feeling like I just couldn't even make sense of where to put my effort and where to start. I know what that feeling feels like. And I will say this before I answer the question. Yeah. I always feel that way. I still feel that way. Like, Lord, help me to know where to start now in this season. And that's the thing is we think we want a plan that is a prescription for all of life. And that sounds like it'd be a lot easier, right? Like someone just give me the checklist. Just tell me what my goals are going to be for all of time. And then I can kind of set it and forget it. And we miss so much though, when we think that there is a formula or an arrival point. So the answer to this question is I always come back to the big picture. I always, constantly, again, and not just a one and done type of experience in life, but I'm always asking myself, where do I want to be when I am 80, 90, or 100 years old? Just in the really big picture, whatever that is for, anybody listening right now, where do you want to be in the big picture? And that question always just snap. It pulls me right back to, okay, Lara, if that is where you want to be in the big picture, if that is really what's important to you, then what are you doing about it today? How does that big picture and today align? So that's always the starting point, and I think it is counterintuitive. Most of us think, all right, the place to start is just getting things done. I just need to first cross everything off my list before I can start thinking about the future. But I'll tell you that every time I ask that question of myself of where I want to be in the big picture, it helps me to cut things off my list today that I thought were, like you said, sometimes we think something is urgent or we think it's necessary, but when we really examine how it aligns with that big picture, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it becomes abundantly clear, oh, wait a minute. You know what? If growing, and I'm just using this as a random example, but if, growing my Pinterest numbers is not going to be important to me when I'm 80 years old, why am I so focused on this today? Why am I stressing about it? Why not just focus somewhere else? So yeah, that's where I would start, is ask yourself that golden question.
I love that. So asking that question, and a lot of people listening are business owners, small business owners, and just, we're intentional, hopefully by nature. How does somebody, like for you, just in that Pinterest, using that as a good example, that's still important, but it's not urgent to you? Or like, what is the filter, what is your best way of kind of taking it to, this is important, but not as important as something that's going to last until you're 80 or 90. But, how do you manage that, as far as that goes?
Yeah, great question. So I'll just give you some brass tacks on how we do it in our business right now.
Sure.
And we're still like evolving and growing and trying to be the best content creators we can be to serve people. But we start with, first of all, what are the pain points that people are expressing to us? What are the needs that need to be filled? And we come up with solutions to those, and then we decide what platform needs to be used. So we used to do this backwards. We would say, all right, we've got a Pinterest channel. We have a, YouTube. We have, millions of things. What are we going to put on each one of those? And now instead we look at, okay, here's the heart of what we need to communicate. What is the best platform? Because the bottom line is you cannot do it all and do it well. You just can't. And so being very strategic in serving people well through the right platforms, for me, helps to cut some of those things off my list. So yeah, I hope that's helpful, because I really think that we often feel as entrepreneurs that we have to use all the platforms, but there's no rule about that. You don't. If it's something is successful for one person, but it's not helping you communicate your particular message to your particular audience, then don't use it.
Yeah. Totally. I want to ask you another just fun brass tacks question, because this is I feel like this is a good and healthy theme that's like coming into our community and entrepreneur community. And even I'm sure you know who Bob Goff is, right?
Oh, yes.
So even like quitting something on a Thursday as well. What are some of maybe one or two examples for you of just, hey, I used to do this and now I no longer do this. So, if somebody doesn't check email until 1 p.m. or they don't check email until they've done their big three, what is kind of your daily system? Because I think that's the big thing, is like the first time going back to the gym, the first time journaling, reading your Bible, reading a book, having a intentional, date with your spouse might feel weird. Like, oh, we planned this, rather than just saying, hey, let's go to dinner. That first step, like, what are those little things that you're doing each day that maybe you didn't do before you were this organized, and now you're like, all right, this is how I make this happen?
Oh man, I'm like trying to rack my brain.
Sorry.
There's probably 100 things that I do that are different. I made all the mistakes because when I first started this business, first of all, my heart was not in the right place. I really was finding my worth in my work. And my faith was very, very broken at the time. And I was just really escaping to my work. And so I made all the mistakes. I worked my tail off and I worked 24/7. So I'd say it seems like an obvious thing, but it's worth saying is that I now fight very hard for my work boundaries. And that means that I have to, instead of just saying, well, here's what I used to do. So I used to just say, okay, I'll take whatever projects or tasks come my way that sound like they're going to grow our business. And now with obvious things, like I have 3 kids, I have a husband that's very important to me. Growing the hearts of my teammates is very important to me too. Everything has to fit in that. And also leave me time as the visionary of this business to spend time with the Lord and hear from him. And it's not always perfect, but some of the ways that plays out in my everyday is, I'm trying to think of where to start. One of the main things is just boundaries with time. So we try to work within office hours. None of us work on the weekends. And yes, sometimes there's times when we have overload or a project or a deadline comes up on us. So we're not perfect with that. But in general, we really do fight for those boundaries because it makes us work better. I also am very, very intentional about not using social media on the weekends. And this is a personal choice for me because of where my marriage was in those early days. And because I had found my worth in my work so much, it has been a life-giving thing for me to take social media free weekends for the last 8 years. And I haven't looked back. And I know that sounds like a basic thing maybe, but I think that it is easy to get into a rhythm with our brains of always coming back to that platform for our sense of worth or for a little high now and then of saying, oh, so many people like this or whatever. And I have to intentionally turn my brain off, not just on the weekends, but sometimes I take week or 2 week long periods just away from it to remember whose voice I should be listening to.
No, I love that. I love that. Now, what's your social media life look like during the week? Are you just kind of whenever you can get it, or do you kind of have boundaries for that as well? You say, hey, I'm not going to check Facebook until dinner time, or, what's your kind of go-to for that?
Yep. I do not look at Facebook at all, actually. So
I love that.
I don't. I made that decision a while ago. I've got a note up there. I don't know if anybody sees it. Sorry. Anybody that sent me a Facebook message, I will never look at them because to me it is another inbox to manage and there are better ways to communicate. So yeah. I personally am not in charge of anything with Facebook. There are several people on our team that take care of our Facebook page.
Sure. From a customer service perspective and marketing.
But as far as personally, I just don't look at Facebook. Occasionally I might post something there, but that's just a choice. I also try to stay out of direct messages on Instagram because, again, it's an inefficient way for me to serve people. And I really have to think about that. Like, where is the best way, my highest and best use of my time right now is in writing. It's in creating content and solutions and praying over those well.
I love that. Yeah.
So social media throughout the week, I try to stay away from it as much as possible because it's easy for me to get sucked in and want to serve people too much.
Right. No, totally. You get that DM and the person seems nice and sincere. It's not, I want to pick your brain. They're like, they've already done the research that they need to. And you're just like, listen, I totally get where you're coming from, or I went through that as well. And just me typing this out is, with my thumbs, it's not gonna be good for either of you, No,
it's just not and especially for the types of things that people tend to write me about, which is very understandable. They're writing me about very personal things, which is something I really want to honor. So if it's something where, someone sends me a direct message, I might say, hey, shoot me an email because I can better serve you that way. I can't do it in a tiny little 150 character message here. So it always comes back to, again, like if you're thinking like, where in the world should I put my boundaries? Just ask that big quick picture question. Where do I want to be when I'm 80? For me personally, what's going to matter is the way I've planted seeds of faith into people's hearts. And in order to best do that, here's how I need to do that. And then I figure out the strategy from there, if you will.
I love that. So this is my cynical brain. And also as somebody who, running my own business wants to keep diving into being more intentional. Time boundaries are really important to me. And after getting married, I've gotten better at it because it's like I started using my wife as a scapegoat. I'd be like, oh, I've got the weekend with the wife, so we gotta block off that time. But now just and they're just learning how much we priorities do change. Like even just not just the faith and the kind of huge ideas, but kind of the medium to big ones. Like, oh, we bought a house, so it's like, hey, we need to make time to when are we going to plant our garden? We should probably put that in the calendar, or like save a weekend in April.
I love that. That's awesome.
And but that's one of those things that business owners don't think of. And you can choose, right? There's plenty of resources where people talk about outsourcing, and you take Uber, you get on a plane, you've outsourced your transportation, or somebody delivers food, and that's totally fine. What is that process for you outside of those, 2 to 3 big ones that you mentioned? Faith, planting seeds, your family, and then your business. Like, what are those other things for you that you're still doing intentionally?
Oh, good question.
And that might be like how often you hang with friends during the week, or what does your house look like, or what does just the kind of plans and stuff like that. Because it's easy, I think, to look at the big things, and then I would say social media is like the tiny things, and we're like, oh, it's okay, we're just not going to touch Facebook, nothing burned down. What about the middle? Sorry, Lara.
The rest of life. That's good. That's good. I appreciate that context. Here's the thing. It's really hard to say no. I think that's just a fact. I think as humans, we want to be able to say yes to everything. We think of the word no as a scary and disconnecting word. We fear disappointing people. If we can't do it all. And in fact, it's something that really goes deep down into the pride in our hearts. We think, I should be able to do it all. People will think I'm awesome if I can say yes to this social engagement, or have a million play dates with my kids, whatever it is. And so for me, the rest of my life looks like really gracefully and skillfully having to say no to a whole lot of things. I get asked to speak at conferences all the time, and I just know that in the big picture, I can't spend that time away from my kids right now. And that's been the case for the last, like 5 years almost. It like pains me to say no to some of those, because there's such great opportunities to serve people. But again, I have to look at the big picture. So I say no to that. And that's why I keep coming back to just the word seasons too, because I always have to keep asking, like, Lord, do you want me to do this? Because it's not about following a rule. It really is about moment to moment. Is this the right thing for me? Same thing with my social life. For me, we prioritize our church family. And granted, we get together with other friends now and then all the time, but people often ask me for coffee dates or whatever. And I just don't have the time when it comes down to how much time I get with my kids each week between work and marriage and all that stuff. So I have to say no a lot. And our weekends right now, something that's new for us this year is we have decided as a family to take Saturdays as a Sabbath day.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this because I saw it on your Instagram. And I think your kids are like near water or something like that. It's like one of your latest Instagram posts. So I was going to ask you about this.
Yeah. So, I haven't, like I said, done like real quote unquote work on weekends in a while. I used to be in the wedding world, and I was a wedding producer at one time too. And like, that was my life. And I get that. So if you're listening, you're like, well, I work every Saturday. Maybe it's not Saturday for you. Maybe it's another day.
Right.
But for us, yes, we realize that our family bond and the way we are as a family is so important to cultivate the hearts of our children, to keep our marriage strong. And if that is strong, we feel like we can conquer the world during the week, all of us. So that means that on Saturdays, we have to say no to birthday parties sometimes, and say no to invitations with friends, so that we can have that concentrated time as a family that we know is going to pay off in the big picture. And again, it's not about following a rule. If we feel like we need to go to a birthday party on a Saturday, that's cool. But in general, just trying to fight for those boundaries for really good big picture reasons.
Totally. No, it's one of those things where I think of the kids in the birthday party, and you say, well, like, what mom wouldn't want her, her kids are being invited. Like this is, right. I was talking to somebody else about this, and oftentimes what I'm finding, and I feel like it's a blessing, and I feel like it's for you the same way, is going to a conference and speaking or doing XYZ or going to that coffee date might still be an okay thing. It might fill you up a certain percentage of, if we could quantify that. And like, it's a good thing. It's okay. Like, birthday parties for kids are awesome and it's cool.
Yes.
But it does, like, when you think of it in the lens of legacy and when I'm 80 or 90, will it be, and this sounds so weird and can get very meta, but it's like, oh, you're thinking about, has this kid been, a really long time friend of our children? I'm just thinking like all those weird questions, but those are good questions. And it's again, like if the world had more intentionality, if we used our blinker more to indicate to other people what we were planning on in our lives, like that's okay. And I mean, it's one of those things where I found whenever I say no, I do try and have a solution. So if it's for those kids who's like, hey, we don't hang out on Saturdays, that's our family day. But if, Timmy wants to come over on Monday night, that's like when we watch football. You can totally come over, we'll make him snacks, it'll be awesome, and maybe we can bring him a cupcake. And that's kind of this like balance and ebb and flow, so that the people that are still a priority can still be in that circle, but at the same time, you can still also, again, think through the lens of that 80 and 90-year-old kind of thing. So I want to ask you one or two last questions. So was there something in your life that prior to, I guess, Southern weddings, or, did you grow up and I think people they hear of you and they think, oh, she was probably really organized. She was a straight A, like valedictorian. She was that kid that had a color graded habit checker, at 8 years old. Like, was that your life? Was it the opposite? Was there something, or were there people in your lives? Was there a leader at church or a Girl Scout member or somebody you saw that was just like, wow? There's a book called Ordering Your Private World, and I feel like people who hypothetically could have influenced you probably read that book a long time ago, and maybe you were just like, oh, that's who I want to be. So was there something that happened in your life that made you do this, or was it kind of what we talked about at the beginning, where it was just that Southern weddings, running your business life?
I'm sorry, I'm laughing so much because I'm just remembering me as a kid with super messy room. I was like probably really the worst person at doing chores. And just fast forward to me having so many struggles with laziness when it comes down to it. Like I just wish that life was easier and there was an easy button and someone would push it. And that's kind of like the mode of my heart for much of my youth. And I worked hard. So granted, there were things I definitely worked hard at. I was very passionate about the art of theater, and I love that so much, but not a very disciplined person. And so I can't say that there was one thing that was a pivotal moment for me, but I think it was more the accumulation of so many experiences where I felt, and I mean this in a real sense too when I'm about to say this, when I felt depression. So I did go through several bouts of depression where I felt like I couldn't find, to speak in big terms, like the meaning of my life. I just felt like I was living by accident for so much of my life. And obviously that feeling spurs you on to ask questions like, all right, well, where is my worth found? And that's where I started to explore faith over the years. And it certainly was not an overnight experience, but I am inherently not a goal person. And I think you're right. People sometimes think, well, Lara, you've written books about goal setting. Your company is goal setting. So what is it that, got you here? It was making a lot of mistakes, honestly. It was so many times where I would wake up and feel like hopeless in a way. And so that's one reason I'm so intentional about my life now is I know what it feels like to be there. I know what it feels like to wake up and have no hope and to feel like my life is going nowhere, to feel like I am powerless to change anything. I also know what it feels like to look at your life and feel like your circumstances are impossible to change. And to put it into a small nutshell, over the course of my life, over the last 10 years, God has shown me otherwise. He's shown me that the impossible is possible. And it is not about my own efforts. It's not about the things that I do or how perfectly I perform or how much I get done. It's really all about his power. And so that's what motivates me every day to wake up and to say, I'm going to make the most of this day. And do I ever do a day perfectly? No, but I try my very best because I just want so much for people out there to know that there is hope. The impossible is possible. And I'm a living example.
I love that. I love that. One kind of last big question for you is, what is that when it comes to these kind of resources and this lifestyle, and there's lots of minutia, but I want to talk about, you hear things like the bullet journal and Cultivate What Matters and just a lot of these resources, which I think it's one of those things where it's like, hey, pick which one is going to work for you. At the end of the day, if you finish one of those, it's going to be a solid thing in your life, hopefully. I found, though, for a lot of people, the feedback I've gotten is that running a business and running your life like a business, sometimes being task-oriented can make your life feel like a job. And what is that? One, does that ever stop? And then two, if it doesn't, what is the frame of mind? What's the paradigm shift for that? And you say, you know what, like going to the gym every day seems like a chore and it's not fun, and I don't have to do it on Saturday morning, but I do it because XYZ. Like in the trees, not the forest, but in the trees, in the now, like how does that translate or pick up for other people when they're like, you know, I just feel like I'm running from task to task, or I'm doing this from, you know, day to day, versus they don't, it's not big picture in that moment.
Yep. I think that we are trained to be hamsters running around in those wheels, right? Everybody has a plan or a prescription for something. And yeah, I couldn't agree more with those pains that people feel. And I've certainly felt that too, where you feel like you're just kind of going through the motions. I'll give you a real life example. Just now, before I got on this interview with you, I was sitting down and playing Legos with my son, Joshua. And I don't know, I'm getting all teary-eyed, but I thought to myself, this is it. This is cultivating. This is a little tiny thing that I am doing in love, to look in his eyes and be on his level and get super excited about monster trucks that has what I perceive as eternal consequences, or results, if you will. I'm planting a seed in his heart that he has seen, he has heard, he has loved, and I hope that translates. And so for me, it is the little things, these seemingly mundane things we do every day, whether it is taking out the trash or getting up to go to your workout or paying your taxes. I just spent a whole 3 weeks doing that too for the year. Does that ever become fun? Maybe not. But when you are thinking about the big picture of, okay, and this is, again, just for me personally, when I look at paying taxes, which is always so difficult in many ways, I think, you know what, I need to turn this into not a have to, but a get to. I get to pay taxes because our business was blessed this year. I get to have the responsibility of stewarding this money, Lord willing, in the way that he wants me to. And I don't have to be perfect in it, but I just have to try my very best. So I think the mundane things in life become meaningful when we really do have a passionate pursuit of the big picture. That's why I always come back to it. And it's not something that is innate for us. I think that it's something that, and that's why, you know, that's why I PowerSheet, if I were to turn that into a verb, but I'm like that. I like to have routine, and I could definitely fall into going through the motions, but because I look at my PowerSheets every day, or whether it's you put it on a sticky note for you, the answer to that question, where you want to be when you're 80, if you constantly have that in front of you, it starts to become ingrained in you. It starts to become your compass. And I think to myself, you know, I'm taking out the trash so that I can serve and love this team, so that they can do their best work to plant seeds of faith in the hearts of people. So yeah, I mean, it does not take you being a big picture thinker innately, does not take you being a strategy person. It's just a simple thing that your brain needs, is to be recalibrated through something as seemingly small as even a Post-it note that has notes on it about where you want to be in the big picture.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Lara, for coming on. I do have one last kind of final question. This is a fun one.
Yeah,
Will there ever be, are there any plans to have any Cultivate What Matters resources or PowerSheets in a darker color? Perhaps black on black. I'm just curious. I know it's not the target market, but I wanted to ask because I see all this stuff.
I know. Okay, well, since you asked, I will say that we hear our gentleman friends, and not just our gentleman friends, some of our lady friends, that like a more neutral option of PowerSheets. So I will say it is being considered.
I love it. I love it. Neutral resources for vibrant lives. So, you know, there you go.
That is good.
So, you know,
that's good.
Listen.
Thank you.
I say that all the time. Like, I wear all black, but my personality is colorful and bold. You know, like that's,
it is.
We just like the resources. So
I hear it in your voice. I love it.
I love it. Well, Lara, thank you so much for coming on. I know I appreciate your time, and it was so great to chat with you. And thank you so much.
Oh, this was a joy. I thank you so much for the work that you're doing to encourage people everywhere.
Man, that was another episode where now I want to just like push everything off my calendar for the day, reset, dive into what matters to me, the priorities, the big goals, and just say, all right, how do we do this? We talked about this a long time ago in an episode where we talked about our goals, and it was essentially, but it lacked the intentionality. This was kind of like how to break up big goals. And, you know, you just have to, how does a whale, you know, how do you eat a whale? You have to take one bite at a time. And the goal isn't a 6-pack. The goal is 10 crunches a day or whatever. And Lara's system is both like task oriented with intentionality and huge picture. And I love that. Like the more I dive in, the better it gets. And so that's been one of those things for me that I think I might try. And I feel like I'm late because it's already January. So maybe I'll try that in 2020 and that'll be part of the 2020 vision for me. But so great. If you haven't checked her out, I would just follow her on Instagram, see kind of where the resources lie, what she has to say. She's got her head on straight. And I think we could all learn a lot from her. And as somebody for me who I've implemented boundaries in the past 2 years of not being on social media, not checking my email, little tips and tricks, but with a big goal in mind and where my time is going. She is a few light years ahead of me, and she's just a good influence for all of us. So I want to say thanks to her. Guys, have a wonderful week. Keep being awesome. Thanks so much.